Welcome to the Fix and Fly podcast, where we help businesses fly by helping identify and fix common business issues before they become major problems. I'm your host, Larissa Logan. Having grown up in a small business family and spending the last 20 years of my career fixing big businesses at some of the top firms like EY and Deloitte, I've seen the same problems come up time and time again. So tune in each fortnight so you can stay up to date on what to look out for in your day-to-day business life. Kate, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
I haven't seen you for a couple of years, and in that time, I think the last time I saw you was at EY, and you were going through the EY Corporate Finance Woman of the Year, and I was on the panel for the Oceania part of, and then you won that, and then you went to the global, and then you won that.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what happened next?
It's been such a crazy journey, I think, since that moment. So I was in my final year of university when I won that award, and I was very much kind of set on going down a corporate pathway. I guess for me, what was a lifelong dream was to become an entrepreneur. And I'd sort of thought I'd put that dream on hold, but I realized, it's probably something that I could actually chase now in this moment and to not keep waiting. So I really pivoted and did a 180 away from corporate and went to do my own thing.
And what I am keen to chat with you about is this brand, Moody, taking off. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I guess pivoting away from a corporate career and then going to start my own business was like a huge risk. And to put it in context, like I'd been a student for 5 years. I had barely any money. I had pretty much no experience. And so for me, I kind of made ends work in those first few years of starting the business by, starting a TikTok marketing agency and trying to get some cash that way, pet sitting, eating oats every day for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And I'd often tell people like I didn't pay myself for the first 2 years of the company. And they say, well, what about birthday presents and dinners out and new clothes? I was like, no one around me got presents for 2 years. But I made it work, and I kind of just invested every dollar that I had into the business. And I think that's, sort of what's led us to where we are today, is just that ruthless pursuit of a goal and sacrificing a lot of other things to get there.
And so how easy was it in the early days to actually get cash?
I mean, it's never easy. I think I was 22 then. As a 22-year-old woman, fresh out of university with, not much experience, it's really hard. And we went down a path of actually deciding not to raise any money or not to take out any loans and just to use everything that I had to try and get the business off the ground. We started really small. I remember putting in the first order for our production run, and it was like 2,000 units of a protein powder, which at the time I felt sick. I was like, how on earth am I going to sell this much product? I think I calculated that I needed to sell 8 units a day to get through it before it expired. And I just remember thinking, worst case scenario, I'll put up a stall at a market and I'll make it all work. But for that first sort of year and a half, things were really slow. We were selling online. We didn't have much traction. I honestly didn't really know what I was doing. And then about 12 months into the journey, we kind of relaunched, rebranded, redid the website. Basically all the seeds that I'd been planting and watering for that first year sort of finally started to sprout. And we just started gaining a lot of momentum that's never really stopped.
So how do you learn about all of this? I mean, there must be a huge amount of things you need to do in the background when you're creating a food product.
I know, and there's so much to learn. And I literally started so naive. I knew nothing, and I learned everything by teaching myself. Google, YouTube, podcasts, books, like literally anything I could get my hands on to teach me anything. It was about like marketing, supply chain, compliance and regulations, manufacturing, packaging, product development, how to start a website, customer experience, all of those things I had to upskill from basically zero knowledge to where I am today. And it's been an incredible learning journey. And one of our superpowers has been that we do everything in-house because I've taught it to myself since day one. And that's been amazing now that the business is in a position where we're scaling so rapidly and I have to, start hiring and coaching and training people. And it's great that I know what good looks like. And we're able to be super dynamic and quick and nimble because we're not relying on a whole lot of sort of external parties to help us get to where we got to today.
And have you reached out to other businesses in your area to get advice?
Yeah, I think for me, the best advice I've had along the journey is from people or businesses who are kind of in the same chapter or just a few chapters ahead. Because I think in the early days, it's easy to look at who you're really inspired by and sort of go there first, but they might be, 20, 30 or more years into the journey, and things look really different when you're at the very beginning. So I did reach out to a few sort of other women founders around me with different businesses and still have those relationships to this day. But I also think that every business is different and what's worked for someone might not necessarily work for you. So I always tell people the best advice I ever got is be very particular on what advice you actually listen to and take, because everyone's got their opinion. And only you sort of know what's going to be best for your business.
I'm super passionate about driving diversity, particularly in my field. There's 21% of female insolvency practitioners in New Zealand, so it's a very low number. But just tapping into that female founder piece, how challenging is it out there?
It's so challenging, and I think particularly the angle that I come from, a lot of those female founders around me are coming from as being young and a woman, which is, a different challenge in itself. And for us, we had early conversations with sort of different people in the investment space. We never formally pitched, but the resounding sentiment was that they didn't really understand the idea. I didn't have enough experience. The market was too crowded, basically that it wouldn't work. And I think that's very similar of the experiences that other female founders have. And particularly in New Zealand, there's such a nascent market for consumer businesses getting started and e-commerce brands as well. I think you look to the US and you look to Australia and that's a lot more prolific, whereas here I think it's sort of very much in its infancy as an industry. So there's not much of an understanding around the upside and then, not much of an appetite to invest.
So what is the upside?
Well, for us, it's been huge. I think the company's grown beyond my wildest dreams. I have to pinch myself every morning that I'm 26 leading a company of this size. We have 1 in 20 women in New Zealand taking our products, and that's just the powdered online products. Since launching into retail with the cans, I have no idea what that number would look like in terms of market penetration, but that's pretty incredible. I went to an event last night and I asked anyone in the room, put your hand up if you'd heard of Moody. And there was 250 women and I think at least 90% put their hand up.
That is amazing, Kate. You should be honestly so proud of yourself. That is so amazing. You're learning at this rapid speed pace, right? What type of support are you putting around yourself to be able to effectively lead Moody and the team into the future?
Yeah, and it's hard. I think the business can only grow as fast as you can grow. And I've had to be very intentional about growing really fast as a leader on lots of different dimensions. We grew 400% last year, 2,000% the year before. I have no idea what this year will entail, but no signs of slowing down. I guess for me, I actually think that naivety has been such a blessing for us. We do things so differently, only because we don't know how things have already been done, and we just take a completely blue sky approach to solving any problem or seizing any opportunity. And I think our retail launch is a great example of that. But in terms of how I upskill and develop, I work with an advisor and a coach on, people management, professional development, personal development. I work with a psychologist on just literally how I manage stress and the uncertainty of running a company that's just spiraling into extreme growth. I read a lot of books. I practice mindfulness, exercise every day. I think as much of a sort of intellectual journey, it's also a spiritual, emotional, physical kind of evolution that you have to go on as well.
Yeah, you absolutely have to be match fit, right? So what are the challenges that you've faced with your supply chain, and what kind of changes are you making to make sure that you can be fully stocked?
It's such a good question, and you honestly cannot forecast what I call unhinged demand. Like, it's a once in a 10-year event for our pre and probiotic sodas, as an example. They sold out within a couple of weeks of launching. The supermarkets even had one flavour per can per person limits on. And the last time they'd done that for a new product launch was the Lewis Road Creamery chocolate milk in 2014. So, over 10 years later is sort of the next time it happens. And yeah, it's very hard to predict. I think for us, we sort of have great visibility across all of our supply chain, and we own pretty much all aspects of that. So sourcing every ingredient, and there are so many. But we can scale up. There is just an inevitable lag time in getting more of what you need. But the great thing is that we are able to act very quickly because we do a lot of it internally. So for example, the cans went out of stock, I think about 2 weeks ago, and we're restocking literally as we speak. So yeah, we're making it work.
That is so great, just so great. And I think that's helped drive your success, right? So now that you've got staff, how does that free you up to focus on the strategic growth and direction of Moody?
It's hard because you put someone in a role and then they take ownership of that and do an amazing job. But then there's the next thing or challenge or problem that you have to almost dive into head first, and that takes up a lot of time. I think with the growth, there's almost never enough you can do to fully keep up and just exclusively work on the business. I'd probably spend honestly 85% of my time working in the business, just doing crazy bits here and there, wearing all the hats. It's kind of chaos. But in a way, maybe that's also a strength because I am so in the weeds and the detail of what's going on and can act really fast and dynamically. A lot of what we do is actually reactive. And because we're so nimble and small and quick, we can see an opportunity or see a problem and just work to sort of solve that or harness that really quickly. Whereas a lot of other companies, they have to spend maybe 6 months planning and then 6 months executing, whereas we're like, oh, we've seen this opportunity, let's go for it tomorrow. And I think that partly comes from being super hands-on.
And then so that also comes back to your structure of your business, right? And so governance is really important. And a lot of the businesses that I deal with, where I see that they may get into financial difficulties or challenges, is where they don't have appropriate governance in place. So there's you and Nick. What structure have you put around the business to be able to set it up for success?
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I alluded to before, we don't have investors. So the number of stakeholders is a lot smaller than perhaps most businesses, and we probably have less accountability than potentially other founders do. But what we've done that's been really important is having advisors who are kind of experts in different things. So, a general counsel, an expert regulations lawyer, an expert in sort of financial control and who's scaled company to a very meaningful size and exited, multiple times. Someone who's run really large teams and dealt with a lot of different P&C issues, so like accountants, obviously, and then other lawyers for different things. So it's sort of having all of those touch points and resources who bring their expertise and knowledge, but also a more neutral sort of objective viewpoint on what you're doing. And they've seen it play out before. And I think that's something I always think about is, this is only one touch point that I'm having. I've only got this as my experience, and I can't necessarily see what I don't know. And that's where those people come in.
I think it's fundamental what you're doing. You're setting the business up for success by getting the help around you to make sure you bring in those experts and bring them in early, and you can see what the outcome has been, right? You've been customer obsessed in the first couple of years. Well, you continue to be. The Moody brand just is. That's just part of the core value, right? And you're getting the right support around the business to allow it to grow.
Totally. And you don't know what you don't know. And I think often what I've been told by some advisors is there may be problems sort of festering in the business, but they wouldn't come to light for, 3-5 years down the track. So you have to be constantly aware of what is the risk, how do we mitigate it, but also where is the opportunities and what might we be missing or not seeing that we could be leveraging.
Exactly. And so just breaking down your customer, are you comfortable getting details about your breakdown between gender?
It's like 99.99%
Is it?
women. Yeah.
Oh my God,
But
men should be having
what I
this.
will
It's
say,
great.
I think men do have it, Larissa. I think it's just
yes.
women buying it for
Exactly.
their partners, sons,
Yeah.
brothers, dads. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely great. Now, I work with a lot of family businesses in different ways. Sometimes we're looking at how do they exit their business. We're talking about succession planning and that type of stuff. Sometimes they are maybe distressed. But what I find in all of these family businesses, there's a unique dynamic that the business doesn't stop when you go home. So obviously you and Nick are both heavily involved in this business. What kind of strategies do you implement to be able to take time at some point during the day to focus on each other?
Yeah, I think it's really hard, especially the chapter that we're in right now, because it is so all-consuming. And the lines, yeah, as you've mentioned, are very blurred between kind of work, home, life, family, business. It's sort of like the business is the center and then everything revolves around that. But for me, I think we are so passionate about what we do that often we will be talking about work or thinking of an idea or talking about the future, and it honestly does not feel like work. I think where it gets taxing is when you actually have to think about the problems and you have to do the actual work and the execution of that, and that kind of proliferating too much into, safe spaces, I think is really hard.
So what advice would you give to someone starting a business?
Do not take no as an answer. I'm an absolute pain in the ass to work with because I hear the word no and I hear a request for more information. And look, occasionally a no is a no. Like if it's someone rejecting you from a job, maybe don't say like, can I give you more information or something? But occasionally rejection is redirection. But most of the time I've had a no, I've been able to turn it into a yes or a different opportunity. And you just get so many roadblocks along the way. And I think what separates sort of an exceptional founder from someone who might, fail early on in the journey is someone who can just keep pushing through all of those roadblocks. And I'd say the other thing for us that's been so important and that I think I would implement again if I was to start another company is speed. Like speed is our superpower. We operate at the speed of light. And in consumer, a lot of what we do to some extent is imitable. Like another company could come along and do something sort of similar. But what we have against everyone else as a competitive advantage is speed to execution. And by the time, someone's copying something, they're copying something that was maybe working 12 months ago, not what's going to work now. So I think, really just trying to be quick and dynamic and then pushing through any roadblocks that you encounter.
I love that. Just no is actually an opportunity to enter into a different discussion. And just not taking no for an answer is why you've ended up here.
Yeah, and you never know how many no's you can turn into yeses as well. I've turned a lot of no's into yeses. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be sitting here if I, so many people told me, I didn't have enough of what it took. I didn't have enough funding. I didn't have enough experience. Like, no, 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 no. Basically, it wasn't going to work. And I just said yes, like here I am.
Oh, well, hello.
Hello. Exactly.
Thank you so much for being on the show. You're a huge inspiration to all of us, and I look forward to seeing how you progress in the next 12 months, and hopefully you'll come back on the show soon.
Thank you so much for having me.